The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Thursday, October 10th, 2019. Thanks so much for joining us. You could have been here anywhere in the world today, but you chose to spend this time with me, and I greatly appreciate it. Special thank you to all of my supporters, all the patrons of the show. Thank you for doing what you do and making it possible. You, too, can become a part of this super elite and extremely cool and unbelievably attractive crowd by going to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and becoming a patron today. Later on in the show, I will thank all of our newest patrons who have signed on. So the attack, the strike from Turkey has taken place and it's ongoing now. And Turkey is reporting, along with other sources, that over 100 Kurdish fighters have been killed so far. They have attacked civilians. There are reports and images of children who have been killed. I have not seen the verification of those images, but I have no reason to doubt, because that's the nature of war. That's the nature of conflict, whatever you want to call it. You can call it an incursion. You can call it a skirmish. You can call it whatever. It's war by any other name. And when this happens, you never know where those bullets are going to fall. You never know where those rounds of those mortar rounds are going to fall and who's going to die. And this is all because, I have to stress this, folks, it is all because of the impetuousness and the cavalierness of this president. He does not care. He simply does not care. He's going to sleep fine tonight with the images of dead Kurdish soldiers and civilians displayed across television. He's going to sleep fine. He doesn't care. It has no bearing on him whatsoever. The concept of betraying the very people that are soldiers. Like, I'm not a nationalist. I'm not really big on nationalism. And I really believe that the American military might should be drastically reduced. I don't believe that we should be in most of the regions that we're in. But if there was a single fight that was necessary, it was the fight against ISIS. Now, we could talk about where ISIS came from. Yes, we can, but it is here. It was here, right? It was there. And we had American soldiers, a handful, about 50 to 150 American soldiers fighting side by side by thousands of Kurdish fighters, the Kurdish-led SDF, and they fought together. And I was going to say they bled together and they died together, but the Kurdish fighters did most of the dying. And even now, our soldiers who are still in the region are infuriated because they cannot help their brothers and sisters who they've been fighting with against ISIS for the last several years. I can't stress how, like, this is another level. This is a new level. This is so far gone that Republicans are like, okay, we can't handle this. And mind you, there's not a dead body. There's not a dead child that would move any Republican. We've seen that. We've seen that over most of my life. So they're not fighting against Donald. They're not angry with Donald Trump because of the death and destruction that his one statement caused. They're fighting against Donald Trump now because they don't like the idea of the American military being withdrawn from any region, especially one where we were supporting our allies. And here we are. Donald Trump is now facing the ire of a handful of Republicans. But, you know, I'm almost at this juncture. I don't care how and what it took for them to finally come on board. Donald Trump has to be stopped. We still have a full year. We have a full year and 2 months of Donald Trump in office, whether or not he's defeated we have a minimum of 14 months unless we impeach him. And can you imagine the damage this man is going to do in order to preserve his control on power? You think a man like this is going to go out and bow out gracefully? Can you imagine the amount of damage that he's going to do now? Now, mind you, Republicans didn't care. They didn't care that he was talking about a third or fourth term jokingly. They didn't care when he involved himself in obstruction of justice to protect himself from the Mueller probe. They didn't care that he, violated the emoluments clauses. They didn't care that he got involved with the situation in Ukraine, a quid pro quo for the purposes of undermining the next election. They didn't care about any of that. So it's not as though Republicans, and I want to keep this in mind, especially for the next segment, these conservatives, these Republicans are not good people. They are not. But Donald Trump is so far gone that they are now finally saying, okay, well, maybe we have to do something about him. Fine. I don't care. Whatever brought you here, you're here. You're still a disgusting piece of human excrement in terms of caring about what's actually been going on over the last few years. But now that you're here, what are you going to actually do about it, Lindsey Graham? What are you going to actually do about it, Ben Sass? What are you going to actually do about it, Mitt Romney? Do something about it. They're talking about sanctions on Turkey, and you know what? Honestly, as much as I'm opposed to sanctions, because I mean, there's a good 20% of Turkey that is made up by ethnic Kurds, so those are going to hurt the Kurdish people. But I honestly, if you ask me, if that's the only thing that's going to stop the guns from firing, then slap the shit out of them with sanctions, and then take the sanctions off. But stop the war that's going on now that was caused by your Republican president. Stop the damage. Stop the hemorrhaging. Not to even mention the geopolitical instability that this man is causing with allowing endorsing Turkey moving into Syria, another nation altogether. It's not as though Turkey was reclaiming their own territory. Now they're claiming the territory of another sovereign nation. So the geopolitical ramifications are going to be far and wide and exist for a long time. But here we are. This is what we're faced with when we're dealing with a president like Donald Trump. Donald Trump. This is what happens when we're negligent. This is what happens when we get used to even with the impeachment inquiry. We have to lay this at the feet of the Democratic Party as well, because there are officials from the White House who are refusing to testify. The White House is telling people not to testify. People are denying the congressional subpoenas, and Democrats have not exercised the full force of their authority to hold them in contempt of Congress. Now, you should juxtapose these two things side by side, because so long as there is no accountability, he is going to do whatever the hell he wants to do in every area he wants to do it. And if on some type of whim, he gets on a phone call with the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and says, well, okay, hey, let's go ahead with the operation. And he feels that there will be no ramifications, that means he can do it again. And so as much as this is the fault of Donald Trump directly, and as much as this is the fault of the Republican Party, who have been licking his boots for the last 3 years, this is also the fault of leadership in the Democratic Party for not actually holding him accountable. Hold this man accountable. Hold his administration in contempt of Congress. Go forward with the impeachment inquiry. Republicans, if you really mean business, then show that you mean business by signing off on these things. Because if you think he's embarrassed you and embarrassed America, I don't know why. I mean, no, I honestly do understand why nothing else he's done up until this point has been an embarrassment to you, because you two are sociopaths. But I get it. That's fine. Maybe now the one thing that bothered you has been touched. Now do something about it instead of tweeting about it.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
And as always, I'd like to thank our newest patrons with, What? What do you mean? No new patrons? None. We didn't get a single new patron yesterday. Well, that's it. Shut the show down, folks. All right, it's been a great episode. No, I'm joking. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and fill the void, the emptiness in my heart. I love those emails. Like when I see those, honestly, when I see those new patron emails, I do a patron dance. And I'm not going to show you. It's really close to my daddy dance. You know how kids make you dance when you're a dad. It's really analogous. It's like 1-to-1, probably the same exact dance. But it really just brings me joy to know that somebody loves me and loves my work. All right, that's about as much joy that you're going to get in this episode. So relish in that moment of joy. That's the only word I have. My vocabulary is a little dim this morning. My son came in the room this morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, and talking about his stomach hurt and you know the bubble guts, and I had to just show him a couple of techniques of how you resolve that. But the point of the story is that I didn't go back to sleep after I fixed his problem for him or showed him how to fix his own problem. He went right back to sleep. I've been up since 3:30 this morning, so my brain is not particularly sharp. So I don't have another synonym for joy right now, but I can move on with the show. Ellen DeGeneres. Here's why I want to talk about her. I know it's 2 or 3 days old, but there is a thing that happened yesterday that I think should be a wake up call if you weren't already awakened to the reality that class warfare already exists. Yesterday, well, 2 things. I think it was the day before, Ellen put out a video about why we should, we can have disagreements and we could still be, congenial with one another. Basically was a sentiment. And all of the elites, all of the wealthy, rich people, black and white and other, Jamie Foxx got in on it. Reese Witherspoon got in on it. They were like, hell yeah, queen. That's it. We could be nice to one another. To a war criminal? Now, listen, are you going to excuse the people, the celebrities who are rubbing shoulders with Erdogan? Are you going to in 5 years forgive all of the celebrities who are rubbing shoulders with Donald Trump? Who will be rubbing shoulders with Donald Trump? Because this is the process. This is how we sanitize mass murder. This is how we sanitize the war crimes of previous presidents. Is because we always think the person who is in office is absolutely worse than the one that left. We always do that. And we've begun this rehabilitation process of George W. Bush. But let me tell you, as bad as that last segment, as I described Donald Trump, and don't get me wrong, I really take what's happening with the Kurds personally, because if you've been following this any amount of time, you know the plight. You know how many times they've been betrayed, and you know how many times they stood up and fought on behalf of their best interests, which happened to be aligned with our best interests. They weren't servants of the American empire by any measure. They just found themselves, they found that they had an opportunity to establish themselves with more autonomy. And they found that their fight was aligned with America's interests. And we betrayed them so many times, and every time they stood up. And you see some amazing stories coming out of that region. I take that particular story personally because of how in depth I've been following it over the years. But let me guarantee you something. There is nothing that Donald Trump has done so far that George W. Bush has not done even worse. He has done, George W. Bush's entire life was committed to attacking LGBTQ rights and go beyond that. They're one and the same if you ask me. If you cannot stand Donald Trump, how in the bloody hell could you ever sit next to and laugh about? And here's the thing. If you sat next to him, fine. Sometimes you end up in places where you were kind of surprised, you're caught off guard. I'm not one of those people who in the moment can instantaneously think of the exactly perfect response. Right? I might get caught off guard and actually be seen in a place in common with some of these people. But what I'm not going to do is come back the next day like Ellen DeGeneres and say, this is just a symbol of good humanity and what America really used to be. No, what America used to be was a torturous nation, or still is, a nation that tortures, a nation that goes to war unprovoked, goes to the wrong war, murders millions of innocent civilians, and he has destabilized the region for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's hard to even remember what the region was like, what the Middle East was like before George W. Bush. And not, that's just internationally. Like domestically, we saw George W. Bush create, wow, Ellen, of all people. And it's just so many things, because even it's not as though he's been completely inactive, because he actively campaigned for Neil Gorsuch to be placed on the Supreme Court. He actively campaigned, I believe he actively campaigned for Brett Kavanaugh, a rapist, to be placed on the Supreme Court. So he's actively working today, right now, against your best interest, Ellen. But you want to get on television and make this big appeal to civility. And then if you want to one-up it, all the celebrities who rally behind her, because they're like, oh, good show, old chap. Good show. Good show. That's how you show the people, these commoners, how to be civil. Let me tell you something, man. When the rubber meets the road and it comes down to them holding on to their dollars or fighting against a fascist regime, they're going to hold on to their dollars. When the rubber meets the road and it comes down to them maintaining their class solidarity versus all of the social justice issues that they actually represent themselves, like Ellen DeGeneres is sitting with the man who actually worked diligently against her ability to get married. But they will sacrifice it for the class solidarity. And what's more, they want to censor you as well. There was a gentleman, Raphael, his name escapes me, but I've been retweeting his video every time I get a chance to see it pop up on the screen. He did an overlay. He did an overlay of Ellen DeGeneres speaking about, civility, with all the images of war crimes that were committed by George W. Bush. And what did Ellen and her team do? They have been going through Twitter all day long, yesterday and today, and getting people struck down with copyright violations over and over and over again. The video pops up, somebody goes and reports, and Twitter takes it down. I mean, that, my friends, that is exactly the type of fascistic censorship. Let's say that 10 times fast. Fascistic censorship that comes not always from conservatives, not always from establishment or whatever. It comes from people who are aligned with the uber elite, the wealthy, the people who cannot stand the criticism from us commoners, the people who cannot stand to hear someone critique them. They will use this tech industry to legit, and this is actual censorship. This is not deplatforming. This is not competing First Amendment rights. This is not somebody trying to shout down somebody else. No, this is a celebrity saying, I don't want that critique of me out there, even though it is fair use. Don't admire any of these people. Don't be a fan of anybody. Because at the end of the day, they're going to protect their interest. And their number one interest is the money in the bank. Always has been and always will be. All right. So last thing for today's show, Bernie Sanders is slowly but surely making his way back to the national stage. He is announcing, his campaign announced that they are going to restructure the campaign so that he is not out in the streets so much. And I applaud that, because, I mean, I am definitely not one to believe that we should sacrifice our lives for other people. I mean, not until it's like literally just absolutely necessary. But I feel like this system will kill you. I honestly feel like this system will kill you, and then they will make a monument to you that is completely contradictory to everything that you stood for. So what's the point of dying for this system? And I think that while a lot of Bernie supporters really want him to go the distance, at the same time, I'm like, man, do what's best for you. If you could do it, then by all means, get out there and campaign. But I honestly, this really, to me, shakes up the primaries. I'm not sure how all of this is going to, everything is going to land. I think the idea of Bernie, and I don't, this is going to sound weird, but I think you'll understand. I think the idea of Bernie will be on the ballot. Hear me, just kind of hear me out. I'm thinking out loud here. I think that Bernie has made such an impact that I don't think that there will ever be a day that this primary will be without him in it in some form or fashion, whether he's healthy and involved or he's, kind of quietly and privately shut down his campaign, but just left his name on the ballot. I think Bernie Sanders will still win this ballot, even if he's not out there campaigning, because that's how much people believe in him. And I think if you are a supporter of his and you still want him to be in this campaign, then I think it has to be more about you and not him. That's his slogan, basically. It has to be more about you carrying the idea of Bernie versus him being out in the streets and killing himself just because you guys, just because he doesn't want to let you down. I just don't believe in that anymore. I don't. I think there's a time and a place where sometimes you're just going to have to be willing to lay your life down. But politics isn't it. I've been studying politics long enough to let you know that politics is not the place where we should expect someone to lay down their lives, and that Bernie should go on vacation and Bernie should get healthy, leave his name on the ballot. But hell, put these surrogates to work, put them out there to work. And you, the supporter, keep the word going. And then also, we got to get rid of Joe Biden. I can't stress this enough. We've got to get rid of Joe Biden. And we've seen Elizabeth Warren get an uptick in the polling. And as I went over with last week, man, she's not pulling from Bernie supporters. She's pulling from Joe Biden supporters. And so the analysis from last week remains 100% the same. We've absolutely got to go head to head with Joe Biden and take some of his support. It's 100% necessary. And you can fight Elizabeth Warren all you want, but she's not pulling from Bernie Sanders supporters, not anymore. I think there was an initial pull of all the people who originally run before they were Bernie feeling the burn. I think she may have gotten an initial boost, but those people were with her and just were waiting on her and simply went to Bernie because she decided not to run in 2016. That's what that crowd is. And now, at this point, though, those core supporters, that group has been solidified. And there's really not going to be a whole bunch of going back and forth between Bernie and Warren. But, the undecided, the people who are really like not necessarily there because they really believe in that person, Joe Biden. They're there not because they believe in Joe Biden. They are there because they have a media-driven misconception. It is a media-driven misconception that Joe Biden is more electable. And so you still need to get out there in these streets and convince every person that you know that Joe Biden is in fact not electable and that he's really the number one candidate in this race that will hand the White House to Donald Trump again for another 4 years. All right. I think that's all I have for today. Tomorrow I'm doing phone call Fridays. I want you to call in 857-600-0518. I normally get a handful of voicemails. I want to hear from everybody. Give me all the voicemails. Give me all the voicemails so that I can respond to as many as possible. 857-600-0518. Don't worry. Nobody's going to answer. Nobody's going to pick up. You don't have to speak to anyone live. Just leave a voicemail with your name, your city that you're calling from, and your question or your comment that you want to leave. And I will air it live during the podcast. And that will be that. Take care, everybody. I will see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show. And support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.